In the meantime, we have another theist caller. We have
Okay. Well,
Tyler
let's
in
do
Ohio.
it. Okay.
Oh, and another one called. Why is church just coming? Do we need to start the show later?
I think we might need to start at noon.
We might have to. Let's find.
Hello.
Hi, Tyler.
Hello, Eric and V. I called like maybe a month ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
I tried to call back sooner, but I've been busy.
No worries. I'm looking at the old notes. You used to be an atheist and watch me back in the day, and since then you've become a believer.
Oh, I remember you. Yeah.
And it says in the notes you want to ask if there's a point where rationality could become harmful or negative. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Could you go into a little bit more detail? Because I feel like we need a little bit more before we can engage with that.
Yeah, so basically my position, and it's because, I know what your show's about, so I figured I'd bring something more than just a testimony this time, right?
Nice.
Yeah, testimony doesn't work super well for atheists.
But yeah, so I think that there is a point where rationality almost breaks down. I mean, I'm all for rationalizing and thinking through problems and life ideas, but I think with rationality being as the only basis for decision making or living a good life, you can basically deconstruct anything that is good and anything that is bad conversely. So you end up, you might be able to get rid of some bad thoughts, but if it's your only baseline of making decisions, you actually end up kind of deteriorating your life. Does that make sense?
It does, just not in the definition that I have of rational. I might use different words. And so because of that, I'm kind of having this mental split where I'm using my definition of rational, which doesn't fit what you're saying, and also trying to follow what you're saying and seeing maybe what language I would use for specifically what you're describing. But I could be, I feel like I could be totally off base and we could be shooting way off into anywhere. So could we start with you defining rational? Because the idea of it, hitting a point where it could be harmful, I don't necessarily understand. So what's your definition of rational?
So rationality, in the way I'm using it, I would say is using like mental logical devices to come to a decision about like something, really anything. I'm struggling with the words here.
No worries. Can I offer one? Maybe kind of give you insight into where I'm coming from on this?
Yes.
So rational is specifically in the realm of epistemology. It is about how you know what you know. And so if you are being rational, the way that I would view it is you are being internally consistent. If you are making a rational decision, it makes sense in the context of everything else that you know about the world. The weird thing is it's not an ontological thing. It doesn't actually have to do with what exists. And so you could have really weird ideas about the world and come up to some weird conclusions, but in your internal sphere, it's rational, right? And so it's really funny because I've seen debates where people talk past each other and they give their internal, their internally consistent view and say this is rational, and are scratching their heads and looking at each other going, well, I have an opposing view and I told you why it's rational to me, and they're just talking past each other. So instead, what if we use the definition that it could be convincing to another person, right? So the idea is that if you find a decision rational, then you should be able to provide evidence that would be convincing to another person. That way, it may seem weird on its own, but when you're using it in practice, it's an engine. It works because then you can actually go, okay, here's what I think could be convincing to you. And it begins the conversation on a forward step so that you can then engage with that. Or
even just putting the word objectively before it. So like the idea is belief in God rational? To a Christian, yes, absolutely. There's no contest. There it is within the theist worldview rational to believe that there is a God. In the atheist worldview, for what it is, it's rational to not believe in a God. If we're talking about something that's going to convince the other side of a thing, then maybe just using the term objectively rational.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's basically how I was using it.
I disagree. I feel like objectively rational tries to, I don't know, shoehorn ontology into epistemology.
Possibly. Tyler, I feel like there are two different conversations. There's the one Eric and I are having where we debate definitions, and then there's the one you want to have. So
True.
give us your question. What is it in a small kind of neat little package?
So I guess my question would be, do you two think that there's anything that maybe you've either damaged your lives or have come to a wrong conclusion on that was just based on you trying to parse objective facts that has maybe hurt your life? Because I could go through some examples of where I think a lot of people, atheists, even Christians, it's not specifically a atheist thing. It's just the application of like this objective reality thing can often lead to a bad conclusion. But
Really?
if you want me to expand on that, just let me know.
Sure. So I would love to, but I also want to make sure that we're kind of also directed in the same place here. So can I repeat back to you what I think you're asking?
Of course.
Okay. So the example that I'm thinking is someone who, without enough evidence, is being indecisive, and then the moment to act passes. That's the first kind of example that I think you might be asking for. But are you specifically like, what kind of example can you give? Because I feel like I'm floating here.
Yeah, so like a good example, I would say, I'll just use a really outlandish one, but it's definitely happened a billion times. Again, has nothing to do with whether you're an atheist or a theist, but we could take like flat Earth, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you could make a completely convincing argument for flat Earth, even though we know it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the conclusion that the Earth is flat is just people getting so high up in their head and not using any sort of other devices other than just, what they want to see. Like, I guess, yeah, their internal rationality. And I think that with a little bit more of like, what is it, like external thought, you might come to a better conclusion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we're missing here is this concept of what I think a better term, Tyler, might be skeptic or skepticism instead of rationality, because skepticism,
yes,
I think, is exactly what we're both talking about. And again, I think we just might be talking about it in a different way. So for me, excuse me, Eric, while I get
you
up here a little bit.
Yeah.
So for me, Tyler, what I'm thinking of when I think of skepticism is definitely part of it is questioning existing beliefs and questioning who is telling me this? Why are they telling me this? Can I find other information that might either corroborate it or disprove it? That's definitely a big part of skepticism. And I think that's what a lot of people mean when they say skepticism, right? I don't think that's true, right? But there's other parts to using skepticism in a healthy and productive way that will avoid you slipping into things like flat Earth or conspiracy theories. And that's what we try to promote on this channel. And some of those safeguards that we absolutely need in order to practice skepticism appropriately is understanding things like Occam's razor, right? Understanding things like, yes, everyone in the whole world could be involved in an enormous conspiracy to pretend that the Earth is round for some reason when it's actually flat. But they could also just be educated in their fields and corroborating something that is objectively true. So there's always going to be that if-or kind of conversation, and it's up to people to use their skepticism and their rationality to think about which is more likely. What confidence level would I ascribe to this thing, right? Am I 90% sure that this is the case? Am I only 60% sure this is the case? So it's not just hardline, always question everything, never believe anything, everything is up for debate. It is, hey, when you're presented with a claim, whether that's a God claim or a claim about the earth being flat or anything else, what you need to do is you need to come at it from the null hypothesis, right? Which is the idea that unless you have evidence to back it up, you're going to withhold a claim, your own claim about it, right? So there is a God. Okay, well, I'm not going to jump straight to no, there isn't. And I'm also not going to jump straight to yes, there is. I'm going to withhold my own opinion until I see evidence in one way or another. Same with flat earth, same with anything else. So I agree with you that if you just use skepticism in that kind of blunt force way where you're hammering everything with this hammer of, no, that's not true, no, there's something else going on here, you're going to be falling prey to conspiracy theories left and right, and that's not good. But there are other ways to use skepticism in a healthier, more responsible way that will prevent that from happening.
Yeah, and then to that point, I would say that since now that we've covered the extreme example, I could talk about how I think it relates to atheism, if you want me to. But,
so we've got V and I have kind of decided we're going to run a little long. We've got a bunch of other callers, but we want to make sure that we're giving you the attention that you deserve. So did you have more to tie into this one, or did you want to hold that next one until the next time you call in?
Well, I think honestly what Tyler is trying to get at is giving an example like you asked, and then tying that back to the original question for us, which is, how is atheism, do you find in atheism that happens, right?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, my point with that example was we can agree that there is a point where skepticism goes too far, right? And I'm not asking you to agree that like atheism is the point, but I just want to know if we have common ground at least there. Like flat earth skepticism, that's too far, right?
That's not skepticism, actually.
Well, it's
they call themselves skeptics, but it's actually not the application of skepticism. It's not.
And I have problems with that because that falls into no true Scotsman territory. Because if you take the philosophical definition of skepticism, and I'm seeing this in the chat as well, and you follow that to its most extreme conclusion, you do get to that point, which is why a lot of people get confused there.
So I entirely disagree. When it comes to conspiracies, and this is going to be our lead into the next caller. But when we're talking about conspiracies, if you are a skeptic and you're saying, I don't know, how do I know the things that I know? Why is this thing this way? That is not substituting in a grand conspiracy. It is not substituting in. You can ask yourself, is it more likely the case X or Y? But if you are, instead of asking why, you're instead trying to find things that back up a predetermined claim, that's not skepticism.
Right, but I don't think that's necessarily inherent in his question.
No, it's the conspiracy
Yes,
thing.
Tyler, go ahead.
So I would say to that if you've ever looked into like what those flat earth people say, their entire like thing is that they're just so skeptical of all the evidence that is presented in the real world that they don't accept the earth is round. Like they just claim that everyone's lying. Like they're skeptical of it. I don't.
Yeah, claiming people are lying is not being a skeptic.
Right. That's the issue here. It's not necessarily that the people who have fallen for conspiracy theories are being skeptics. It's that a misapplication of skepticism left them open to being taken in by conspiracy theories.
There we go.
Right. So, Tyler, to get to the point of this call, to answer your question, there are things about my worldview that are sad now because I applied skepticism to them. I no longer believe in an afterlife, right? I don't think I'm seeing my grandpa again. That's really sad. I don't think that we have souls. I have not been convinced that that is a thing. And that is weird to grapple with. And that throws a whole bunch of preconceived ideas about the sacredness of humans and all of this up in the air, right? So yes, there are things that I quote unquote lost when I applied skepticism correctly to my beliefs. But I would rather know what is true or be closer to truth than be happy, right? If your goal is to be happy, then don't be a skeptic, because that sucks. If your goal is to know what is true and find peace in that knowledge, then skepticism might be right for you. Consult your doctor. May result in extreme absurdism. That's my response to you. Eric, do you have any?
You know what? I see the bait you threw out there, but I also want to make sure that we have time for the other calls. No, I'm going to leave it at that, because you left a really good point. I would love to just underline that, and that is that feeling bad about a thing is not necessarily a bad thing.
That's really good.
Yeah, learning, sad truths is not bad. And the only time when I see skepticism taken too far is when people aren't, the ultimate goal of skepticism is I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
finding how many steps there are to I don't know can help you cut out a whole lot of crap that you're that's lumped in with whatever conclusion you're investigating. The conclusion of skepticism is ultimately that. And I don't know. I feel like the only thing that you would get if you were over applying skepticism is indecision and the inability to come to a decision. But then ultimately from there, you need to rely on other tools like empiricism.
Right. And I think that was my point. My point is that we cannot assume that all those other tools are inherently in the concept of skepticism. They are applied to skepticism in order to make sure you get the best result.
Yeah.
But to suggest that empiricism or humanism or any of these other things are included in skepticism is fallacious.
Yeah.
So anyway, we have a couple more calls to get to, but Tyler, it was good talking to you again.
Yes, I would absolutely love to go deeper on this topic at some point.
Yeah.
So, because I think there's a lot more to be had here. I think this could be very productive.
I love it. Let's definitely give us a call back, probably closer to 11:30 than 12:30, and we will make sure to get you up there.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. You'll take care of a beautiful day.
You too. All right. Tom or Nick?
Okay, so here's the deal, you guys. We talked with our amazing call screeners, and we have two amazing theists and somebody who wants to talk to Eric about the ex-vampire interview with an ex-vampire. It should have been called Interview with an Ex-Vampire.
No. That's the name of his actual 8-part series.
Oh, never mind. Never mind. We are going to run a little bit long. If you want to hop off to see other
Heck
shows.
no, stay with us. We got the cool shit coming up. Let's go. Who are we talking to?
We're running long. We're going to talk to all three of these callers.
Damn straight.
So stay on the line. Our call screeners have decided to stick with us. Thank you, all of you. We're going to run a little bit long, and